Welcome to Bree's Dark Desserts. If you'd like to bake along, the recipe will be in the description box below. Today we're going to be making Kool-Aid pink lemonade cupcakes with lemon buttercream, while I tell you the story of the crazed man behind Jonestown and the start of a popular saying we've all heard. The real story behind the phrase isn't what you think. It's much darker and sinister than just office talk. Over 900 people, 300 of them children, tragically lost their lives. And it all started with a man who promised paradise and gave them a nightmare instead. So without further ado, let's dive into this dark dessert together. To get how something so horrifying could happen, you have to get to know the man at the center of it all. James Warren Jones was born in Indiana in 1931. He was a charismatic kid obsessed with religion and preaching from a very young age. By the 1950s, he founded his own church in Indianapolis, and he called it the People's Temple. Now, at a time of intense racial segregation, what the People's Temple was doing was radical. It was a fully integrated church where black and white families could worship together. Jones preached a powerful message of social justice and equality. The temple wasn't just a building, it was a community. It ran soup kitchens, offered legal aid, and set up homes for the elderly and the mentally ill. Jones even landed a spot on the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission, using the position to help desegregate the city. For many people on the margins of society, the temple wasn't just a church, it was a lifeline. It was the promise of a world without racism or poverty. Jones wasn't seen as a preacher. He was a prophet, a father figure who offered the hope and belonging that society had denied them. He performed so-called faith healings and built a fiercely loyal following. The temple exploded, first in Indiana and then moving to California in the mid-60s, gaining thousands of members and real political power. But behind all the utopian promises, something much darker was starting to take hold. The slide from a progressive movement into a destructive cult was slow, almost unnoticeable to those on the inside. As Jim Jones' power swelled, so did his paranoia and his demand for total loyalty. He started cutting off his followers from the outside world, from their families, and from each other. He preached that the U.S. government was the enemy and that the People's Temple was the only safe harbor on earth. Control became everything. First, members were pressured and later required to sign over their homes, their paychecks, and all of their possessions to the church. Families were broken apart, children were raised by the community and taught that Jones was their one true father. He used sleep deprivation as a weapon, forcing people into marathon all-night meetings where he would rant for hours about imaginary enemies and traitors in their midst. Public humiliation and beatings were also used to enforce discipline for the smallest of mistakes. But there were more than just punishment. They were loyalty tests, engineered to shatter a person's will and make them completely dependent on Jones. He controlled every piece of information, even who they could speak to. He controlled their entire lives. By the mid-70s, bad press and stories from people who had escaped started to leak, telling tales of the abuse and mind games inside the temple. The walls were closing in, and Jones needed an exit plan. He needed a place where no one could touch him, a place where his control would be absolute. He wanted to call it Jonestown. In 1974, Jones got his hands on a 3,800-acre tract of remote jungle in Guinea, South America. He sold it to his followers as their promised land, a, quote, socialist paradise, where they would build a perfect new world far from the corruption of modern life. In 1977, as the pressure from investigations mounted, Jones and nearly 1,000 of his followers fled to Guinea. But the utopia they were promised was not what they found. Life in Jonestown was hell. Members worked from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week, hacking through jungle, and trying to farm in the blistering tropical heat. Their passports were taken. Their mail was read and censored. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and it was not to keep danger out, but to keep everyone in. One survivor would later describe it as being like a, quote, concentration camp. Isolated in the jungle, Jones's paranoia spiraled out of control. His rambling sermons and political rants were broadcast over the settlement's loudspeakers all day and all night. He started running terrifying drills he called, quote, white nights. He'd tell everyone that they were surrounded by enemies and that their only way out was revolutionary sewer slide. They'd been given cups of a flavored drink and told it was poison. He was giving them loyalty tests, a horrifying dress rehearsal for the real thing, conditioning them until the line between a drill and reality began to blur. Back in the States, people were getting scared. A group called the Concerned Relatives, made up of ex-members and family, were trying to sound the alarm about human rights abuse. Their pleas finally reached Leo Ryan, who was a congressman in California known for his hands-on investigative approach. Ryan announced that he was going to Jonestown himself to find out if people were really being held against their will. On November 14, 1978, Ryan flew to Gena with a small group of people that included his aide Jackie Spear, a team of journalists, and several of the Concerned Relatives. After some initial resistance, Jones finally let them into Jonestown on November 17th. At first, it was all for show, a big feast, musical performances, acting like a happy, thriving community. But the mask slipped. During the visit, residents began secretly passing notes to Ryan and the journalists, begging for help to get out. By the next day, November 18th, it was clear that dozens of people wanted to leave with the congressman. For a paranoid, deteriorating Jim Jones, this was the ultimate betrayal. He was losing control. As Ryan's delegation and the defectors got ready to leave for the nearby port at the Katuma airstrip, Jones sent a horrifying plan into motion. He ordered his armed security guards to go to the airstrip. Just as the group was boarding the small plane, a tractor trailer filled with Jones's men pulled up to the airstrip and opened fire on the plane. It was a brutal, swift ambush. Congressman Leo Ryan was shot and killed on the tarmac. 3 journalists and one of the defectors were also murdered. Jackie Spear was shot 5 times and left for dead, but she survived by pretending to be dead until the attackers left. The airstrip massacre was the point of no return, and back at the campground, Jones was gathering his followers for one final terrible act. With Congressman Ryan dead, Jones ordered everyone to the main pavilion. On an audio recording of that final terrible hour we now know as the death tape, you can hear Jones tell his followers that the time for, quote, revolutionary suicide had arrived. He claimed that because of the attack on the congressman, enemy forces would soon descend on Jonestown to torture their children and destroy them all. His voice, a chilling mix of panic and calm, sealed their fate, leading to the tragedy that started the popular saying, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," warning others not to give in to blind faith and group thinking. Jim brought out vats of a grape-flavored drink laced with a deadly mix of cyanide and tranquilizers. The misconception of the popular phrase saying, quote, Kool-Aid, was slightly incorrect. He gave them Flavor Aid, which was a cheap knockoff of Kool-Aid, but it was the more famous brand name that would be seared into public memory. The children went first. Parents were sadly instructed to poison their own children before taking the drink themselves. It was a scene of unimaginable horror. And while some did seem to drink the poison willingly, this can't be called a mass sewer slide. It was a mass murder sewer slide. Survivors and evidence later confirmed that many were forced, and some were injected with the poison while trying to resist. Armed guards surrounded the pavilion under orders to shoot anyone who tried to leave and run away. In the end, 918 people died that day in Jonestown at that airstrip, and Jim didn't even go out the same way he was forcing all of his people to go. Instead, he shot himself. The world was stunned by the news from Ghana. The images that came out were haunting, a grim testament to the absolute power of one man's manipulation. For the handful of people who survived, the trauma was beyond measure. They had lost everyone, their families, their friends, their entire world. A survivor, Yolanda Williams, stated plainly, quote, "They were innocent. They were victims. They did not willingly die. This was a massacre." In the years that followed, Jonestown became the ultimate cautionary tale about cults, and then slowly the phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid" began to creep into our language. It started showing up in businesses and politics to describe someone who blindly follows a leader or an idea. It became a slick metaphor for groupthink, completely unhooked from its gruesome origin. Using this phrase even casually makes light of the suffering of 918 people. It reduces a complex story of hope, fear, and murder to a throwaway punchline. And for the survivors and the families of those victims, hearing it is like a slap in the face, a painful reminder of everything that they lost. The story of Jonestown reminds me of two scriptures. Psalms 118, 8-9 says, "It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes." And Jeremiah 17:5 says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord." Jonestown is a heartbreaking example of what happens when trust is placed in a man instead of God. So, the next time you hear someone say, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," maybe you can tell them the real story. Thank you so much for learning and baking with me. If you enjoy this video, go ahead and hit that like button and ring that bell so you won't miss any more wild stories and decadent dark desserts. And if you're new here and curious for more, hit subscribe and join your fellow dark bakers. This has been Bree's Dark Desserts. May your day be not only sweet, but blessed, and may the stories and treats inspire both your heart and your hands.